Thank you so much. Can you all hear me well? Yes. Thank you. It's great to be here in your house. Great to see that despite being on the ground floor, you bounced back. So congratulations. And let's hope we won't ever have to do that again. We have the same problem in the museum, so I feel the pain. So let's see, I don't want to be in front of it. I'll probably be behind the wooden here. And we're here today to talk about local shells. But beyond local shells, I also want to give you a little bits of information about the animals that make those shells. A lot of people love shells. They know what shells are when they know what they are when they see one. But believe me, a lot of people don't know that they are made by animals. And as you see, hopefully I'll be able to convey this message today that they can do some pretty cool things. I mean, pretty amazing animals despite the small sizes. The selection I have here is a selection of purely Sanibel shells, including a little sea slug from the Sanibel Causeway that doesn't have a shell. So it's like a paradox, a mollusk that doesn't have a shell, but yet they are mollusks. I don't know if you probably can read from the back, but I'll read this to you. It's part of our new Great Hall of Shells that we are hoping to launch at any moment now during the first quarter of 2025. We're still under construction. An abundance of shells. One reason for the spectacular number and variety of shells in Southwest Florida is an unusually large, shallow continental shelf, the part of the land that's underwater. So Florida, as you see the next slide, I have an illustration. The continent doesn't end where the water begins. Sometimes it extends underwater, and you see how wide that continental shelf is here in Florida. Extending more than 80 miles into the Gulf of Mexico underwater. This relative absence of deep water and wave activity makes it easier for the billions of mollusks living on the shelf or their empty shells to reach the shore intact when you have storms and winds and all that. Winter winds move water in ways that drive even more mollusks and shells ashore, especially on islands such as Sanibel, Captiva, Cayo Costa, Marco, Cais, and the northern 10,000 islands. Fewer shells accumulate in the summertime when winds are weaker, except when there is a big storm. I don't like to say the H word, storm. Then we may see some shells. We don't want that. Here is what I was talking about. This is a map of the Gulf of Mexico with Florida here. Sanibel is right there where the little arrow is pointing at. And you see that there is a very broad shelf, a shallow area that is almost, actually at some points, is as wide as Florida itself. And that whole area is grounds for the growth of mollusks and other marine organisms such as fish, sea stars, and all that. This is actually a picture I took on the lighthouse last February in 2024. We were doing a shoot for the News Press, a little article they were doing on shelling. And we were there early in a low tide, in a day at low tide. And we actually sat down and was actually capable of seeing the little waves pushing the shells gently out of the water onto the dry land, onto the sand. And it's really, we all know that the shells arrive there, but I could actually sit down and see them gently coming. And to me, this is the essence of shelling on the barrier island, especially here on Sanibel Island. A wonderful area, wonderful place. I'll give you just a run to whet your appetites for some of the new exhibitions we'll have in the museum coming up. We have a section on Southwest Florida shells in which we describe the different habitats that those living mollusks occupy, beginning by sandy beaches, and we selected 9 species from each of those different habitats. Sandy beaches are a well-known habitat for mollusks. We we have the mud flats. This is a picture of Bunch Beach and with the bay here and the tall bridge, the causeway in the background. Those mud flats are rich environments for the growth of mollusks. We have mangroves. Many species like to grow on mangroves, some of them growing on the branches of the mangrove trees. Oyster reefs. Lots of mollusks, not only the oysters are there, but there are mollusks that feed on the oysters. There are mollusks that feed on the mollusks that live on the oysters, and so on. So there's a whole food web associated with oyster reefs. Human-made structures, those hard structures such as piers, jetties, seawalls, and all that, they attract a special group of mollusks, and we have examples of some of those here. Offshore and deep water. Again, we have species in deep water that will very rarely reach the beach. Only when we have a big storm or big winter, northwest winds and such. One of them is the famous Junonia. I don't know, probably cannot see well, but a well-known local species that if you find one, you'll get a photo in the newspaper. And many have done that. One resource that I want to point out to you all is first of all, our website. It has a wealth of information on shells and mollusks. I've been working on this shell guide basically since I started working in the museum in 1996 and been working on the shell guide since 1997. And it has gone through several editions, if you will, online editions, and always refining, adding new local species. Right now we have around 405 local species. So if you like shells or if you know someone who likes them, make sure you tell them to check our website. It's shellmuseum.org /shell-guide. And again, if you want any information, you can always ask questions at the end, or you can get in touch with me via email. I'm here on the island too, so it's an easy one. This is an example, a page from the shell guide. The cloudy periwinkle. I'll talk a little more about this species a little later. But just to give you an idea of how we treat each of the different species, we have pictures of the shell. Then we may have pictures of the living animal. We have a brief description and sometimes references that to works where they have treated that species. This is a mangrove periwinkle. Also a page from the shell guide online. The advantage of having a shell guide online versus a book is that if you do a book, it's set on paper and you have to wait for a new edition to update, fix boo-boos or add new species. With the online guide, I can go back to my office and change things. And I get a lot of feedback from enthusiasts and colleagues who say, hey, you forgot to say that here, or you have the wrong name there. It does happen. I'll show you some of that. I mentioned earlier that I was going to say some little things about the animals. This is a Tampa top snail. It's a local species of gastropod. Gastropods are snails. Mollusks with a spiral shell and only one part of their shell versus bivalves, like clams, mussels, and oysters. They have a shell with two parts that are hinged. So I want to show you something really curious here. I want to show you a picture of the live animal of this species. And this photo was taken with the animal crawling onto the wall of an aquarium, the glass. So you can see the foot of the animal. The animal was kind of gliding on the glass. And up there, you can see the head, right here. And you can see the mouth. You can see two tentacles. You see one eye here, one eye there. And if the next image, I'll show you that, but I want to show a detail where you have a detail of the mouth here. Again, one eye, one tentacle. And you can see a pair of jaws that they have. This whole group of top snails, they have little jaws that they can hold, you know, the food they are eating. And then the radula being this structure here, which is like a rasp, pretty much like a cheese grater that they use to remove particles of their food items and swallow that. Another local species is the one-tooth Simnia, and they call them one tooth because there is a little projection here that looks like a little white tooth. And this species is very special. The shell is really pretty. It looks like I don't know if you guys know what a cowrie is, but it looks like a cowrie. It's small. It's like about 3/4 of an inch at most. But it lives on some marine animals called sea fans. And here is the picture of a living one. This is a branch of the sea fan. And the sea fan is a colony of many, many little polyps. They look like tiny white flowers. You can see them here. Here is the mollusk. Here is the living shell. And that animal, on its skin, you know, when they come out of the shell, the outer skin of the animals have little projections that look just like the polyps they eat, which is a very smart way of camouflaging. So they are camouflaged, you know, by mimicking. They mimic the structure they live on, and that they are also the structure of the food they eat. Actually, same color also. If you can you all see that? Here, the animal. That's the head of the animal. That's the end here.
Is there any fear that the brother will eat his sister? If they are so similar looking?
Yeah, no, they know. I think one of the main ways. That's a very good. Did you all hear her question? She asked if there is danger of one of them eating, or a brother eating a sister, or a sister eating the other sister. Actually, they find things mostly by smell or taste, and they know the smell of their food. So anything that doesn't have that smell, they're not going to touch. So they're not very visual. Unlike some other mollusks, like as you see still today in my talk, some other mollusks that have very, very refined vision. Those don't. They go by sense of smell. That's one of the local periwinkles. Not the flower, but the periwinkle shell. And it's a living periwinkle from, it was photographed that on the back of Dixie Beach here on Sanibel. You can see the little head here, eyes and tentacle, and the big foot of the gastropod. Mollusks have a foot that has nothing to do with our feet. It's just a structure onto which they crawl, or they use that for burrowing, depending on the species. That's the clouded periwinkle. And clouded periwinkles, they like to, the previous species I've shown you, they love to grow on mangrove, red mangroves, living red mangroves. This one here, the clouded periwinkle, likes dead wood. So they like dead trees, and you know, if you go to Cayo Costa, on the southern end of Cayo Costa, there's a bunch of black mangroves that died during Hurricane Charlie in 2004. And that's where I took this picture. It's like a hollow in the tree, the dead tree, and they all aggregate there for protection. And they have very nice looking shells, and those, they are almost light blue, I mean, a very delicate color. And those are more clouded periwinkles, but those are from Cais Island in Collier County, which is just south of Naples. A couple of species I'll show you now, showing you the egg capsules that they make. A lot of those mollusks, after they mate, the female will lay their eggs inside protective egg capsules. And the egg capsules are really a miracle because they provide protection. There will be a number of little eggs and they will grow into little embryos and then, like little baby mollusks. And they grow for a while inside the egg capsule. And the egg capsule provides protection and also provides nourishment because the mother made that egg capsule and with liquid inside, a liquid that's their food for the duration of their stay inside the capsule. Once they hatch, they begin feeding on whatever food they'll be feeding at that age. But this here is a sharp rib drill. It's one of the local drills. And we call them drills because they actually use their radula. Remember the rasp-like organ they have? They drill holes into other shells, living shells. And they will drill a hole so they can either suck the animal through the hole, they can inject substances through the hole that will, kill the animal, anesthetize the animal, whatever they need to do to be able to eat it. And next I have pictures of their egg capsules. Actually, I have a picture of female laying their egg capsules here. And that's how the egg capsules look like. They're about 1/4 of an inch in size, and they look like little champagne goblets, like little champagne glasses. And inside each one of them, there will be a couple of dozen, the number varies, but around a couple of dozen little eggs that will develop into embryos. There is also a substance, purple liquid inside that many species of this family, the family is the Murex family. That's where the drills are, they are Murexes. And this substance called murexin, they did some research on it and found that it has calming properties. It's like a relaxant or some kind. It makes the embryos all kind of calm down, and especially at the moment of hatching. So they all hatch at the same time. No one is left behind. That's the conclusion the scientists drew from looking at this chemistry of this compound, this substance. That's another murex, another drill, famous lace murex, a very famous shell for shelling aficionados here on the island. A very elegant shell. This is the young of this species. As you know, mollusk shells will grow from here to here by the animal laying more and more shell material in a coil fashion. So this is the oldest part of the shell here. And as you get closer to the opening, it will be younger and younger. So this is how the young shell of this species looks like. So this is how this guy here looked like when he was, who knows, maybe a couple of months old, or maybe even less than a couple of months. And those are the egg capsules. They're really cool. They have little openings, and those openings are the openings through which the babies will hatch when the time is right. And that one has that little opening has a little membrane, almost like saran wrap. I mean, very thin and totally transparent. You can actually peek inside and see the little guys if you have a microscope. I call them escape hatches because that's where the little embryos would hatch out from. A couple of more local species. This is before I show the egg capsules of this species. I want to show the horse conch, the famous horse conch, which is the largest shell in the Atlantic Ocean and the second largest snail shell in the world. The biggest one is the Australian trumpet from the Great Barrier Reef and neighboring areas. But locally, in this ocean, this is the largest shell, and we have it right here. If you go a few 100 yards back to the bay here, you may see them alive. They live in very shallow water, And they are very, very fierce predators. Here you have a picture of a horse conch eating a Florida fighting conch. And we don't know exactly yet, we don't know how they feed. We know they kind of embrace the mouse they're eating and make almost like a chamber with their food. And at some point, the prey, the little guy there will die and they'll begin feeding. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. This is a nutmeg. And a nutmeg in its adult size, which is about 1.5 inches, it can grow up, the big ones can grow up almost to 2 inches, but normally they're about 1 inch, 1.5 inches. And this is a young one. In the same scale, you see those two pictures were taken at the same time, and that's the same scale. And here is a blow-up version of that. So I made it much bigger so you can see the difference and the similarities. It's different, but it has something, kind of the soul of the species is there. You can see that it can easily grow from there to that. One of the cool things about this species is that you can find a lot of pure white shells of this species, just like that. And the collectors call them albinos. They're not really albinos in the sense that we know, because the animal itself has the normal color of the animal. It's just the shell that doesn't have the pigments. And this is a picture I took like last week, and shows this structures here on the shell, which is the part of the shell where the animal attaches to. So the animal is firmly attached to the shell because there is a muscle inside that is attached to these structures here. It's like they coil up the shell. That's how it looks like. That's the horse conch. That's a young horse conch. And as I mentioned before, if you look carefully, the well-preserved shell, you may be able to see the baby shell on top here. Because the growth, mollusks grow in a way that kind of growth allows for the retaining of the early shell parts as part of the final shell. And those are the egg capsules of the horse conch. All those big local shells like lightning whelks, horse conchs, tulips, they all lay their progeny in egg capsules. All the eggs go into protective egg capsules. That's another picture of the lace murex in one of the museum aquariums way back 8 years ago, I guess. At the moment, she was laying the egg capsules onto a dead oyster shell. And they do that gradually. It takes a while for the females to do that. Those are tulip eggs. That's a tulip shell up here. I want to make sure you know when I'm talking about a species that you know how it looks like. So the egg capsules of the tulip looks like that. And if you look carefully, you can see little orange. It looks like miniature oranges inside. Those are the embryos. Eventually they'll become the baby tulips. And that's about 1/2 inch in size. That's a crown conch. Oops, go back. Crown conch. You can see the shell up there. Some people call them crown conch. Some like to call it king's crown, but it's the same species. And this is a female actually laying a sequence of egg capsules. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And in one of our tanks, and one of our very smart aquarium workers, she filmed as this female was laying her egg capsules. And she used a time lapse, and she filmed about 1 hour of 1 hour of action, and then we play. I'm sorry, I should have brought the video, but I didn't have it in my computer. We played it in 12 minutes. No, we played it in 1 minute and 20 seconds of 1 hour of egg laying. so we can see going like pretty fast. What happens is the eggs come out of the female opening. This is the foot of the animal. That's the head, and the animal is onto the aquarium glass. So the eggs will come out of the female opening, which is around here in the animal, kind of behind the head, and will kind of be moved onto a little groove, into a little groove, and go in a gland on the sole of the foot of that snail. And in there, the animal produces the egg capsule. It makes, the top makes the bottom pretty much like a pill box. And then once it's made, it hatches, it pushes it out, and then goes and does the next one. It's a very, very, it's a very impressive process. The animal's small, but to me that's very impressive the way they do it. That's a fixed snail, the living animal. And you notice that part of the animal comes out of the shell and covers the shell a little bit. And then if you poke at it, or if it gets spooked by a predator, it will retract back inside the shell. That's a stack of egg capsules, and that's a single egg capsule removed from here. And you can see the little embryos inside. Actually, those are little larvae that eventually will hatch out, just like that, just like the parents, the mom and dad. A local, one of the favorites with the Junonia and the Scotch bonnet, it's called an alphabet cone. And here are the egg capsules of the alphabet cone. Now the alphabet cone is a little different from the other ones I've shown you, because once the little babies hatch out, they don't begin crawling on the bottom like the other species do. Once the larvae hatch out, it will go swimming with the plankton. It becomes part of the drifting organisms in seawater. It could live there for a couple of hours, 5 hours, and then come back to the bottom. Some species can live for months in free water, in open water, and living a free life before they become adults. And those are the little difference. So, and this is how it looks like. That's the same species here, the same alphabet cone, but right after it hatched out of the egg capsule, like 5 minutes, I took these pictures, like 5 minutes it hatched out of the egg capsules. And you can see actually the shell here, right? It doesn't look anything like the shell of the mother. You can see the eyes here. That's the foot. No, that's not the foot. This is the foot here. And those structures here, they lose. They only have those structures during the larval phase. Once they settle to continue their lives as adults on the seafloor, they lose those structures. Those structures are pretty much like fins, or they help them, become stable in the water, help them swim a little bit. See how different what a baby can be from the parents. That's a lightning whelk, another local iconic species. And lightning whelks are very well known because they are the only shell that if you hold them with the tip pointing up, is the only shell that has the opening on the left-hand side. So they call this sinistral shell versus dextral. That has most gastropods are dextral. They have opening on the right-hand side. And this is a female. In lightning whelks, in this species, the females are always much larger than the males. And those little guys here, those two small, actually 3, they are the males. And I took this picture right after the Hurricane Ian. We went out in December, like 3 months after the hurricane, just to check the health of the mollusks in our beloved San Carlos Bay, and things were really looking good at that point, despite all the havoc that the hurricane has strewn there. Yeah, that's another picture of that olive showing, like a sign of hope in my view. That day I was touched by that, because we were expecting to see nothing. We didn't know what to expect, but I was very, very anticipating, a disaster, and we actually saw a lot of living things that day. And this is a chain of egg capsules of the previous species of lightning whelks in North Captiva. Again, another lightning whelk doing what they do for a living, which is eating a clam. That's what they love to eat. And I'll explain to you what you see here. You see the lightning whelk shell. The black part is the foot of the lightning whelks. Have a very nice velvety black body. Like the skin is really, really cool. It makes you want to touch it because it's very, very smooth and not gooey at all. They don't have that. People imagine it will be like lots of mucus, but they don't have that. And this here is the operculum, which is the last part of the animal that goes in after the animal retracts itself inside the shell. So if there's a reason, if they get scared or spooked by a predator, they'll go in, and the last part that will come is what we call the trapdoor or operculum. That's what you see here. And here is what they eat. What this one is eating a Sunray Venus clam. Actually, I already ate one, but we eat them, baked or steamed. They used to grow them here on Pine Island, and Bailey's used to sell them at some point. And we had a reception at museum maybe 9-10 years ago, and we just hired them to cater. I mean, the Bailey family is very close to us always, and Richard Johnson actually was helping with that. And when I looked, so I can't believe you bring a Sunray Venus, and it was great. I mean, they tasted really, really nice. But they are not growing that anymore. So this is a lightning whelk shell. This is a ladder olive, another local shell that very elegant. I think I have a photo there, like there on top left. And ladder olives have a very eclectic food taste, if you will. They can eat different things. They can eat living clams, they can eat worms, and they can eat dead stuff. So there are like, here I counted 9 olives feeding on a dead, it's called speckled swimming crab. It's a very common species of crab here. And this actually is a photo from, taken on Kais Island by our colleague, Amy Tripp. We have a very nice exhibit of Amy Tripp's photographs in the museum as we speak. And she's always out there taking pictures of living things and finding situations that we never imagined could happen, even in the professional world where I come from. And this is one of them. This is a little sea slug, and a sea slug is, we have sea slugs that have medium-sized internal shells. We have sea slugs that have very small internal shells inside that you cannot see. And then you have sea slugs without any shell. This one has kind of a medium-sized shell, and that's how the shell looks like. You can see there's a little coiling to it, and the shell is around here. It's a very elegant little sea slug, about 1 inch long. That's a larger sea slug. It's called a black sea hare. And sea hares are really, very interesting animals, and there are times when you have swarms of them on the Back Bay area here, the north side of Sanibel. And the black sea hare, like a good sea hare, has an internal shell that's around here. See, there's like this kind of a oval shape here. That indicates where the internal shell is. And that's how the internal shell looks like. It looks like a big fingernail, yes.
We saw, I remember when we moved to the island, swarms of those out near the lighthouse in May of 2020. then we haven't seen them again, and I wondered if there was a breeding, was a breeding, thing going on, because there were so many and then I haven't seen them again.
Yeah, a lot of that, a lot of those swarms, they happen during the mating season, or in some cases, they may not mate, but it's the season when they're releasing, they're reproducing by, sometimes the male and the female do not get together. The female releases their eggs in the water, and the male releases their sperm, and the things mix up in the water. But you have all kinds of situations. It could well be that was what was happening. One of the things that people ask me all the time, why do we see different shells different times of year, or from one year to the next? Things change. In most cases, we really don't know. And we know that a lot of that can be a result of human intervention, like water releases that are detrimental to the environment, like we see here all the time, or lack of oxygen in the water, or in some cases, the reproductive cycles of the species. I don't know exactly why. Like this is a good example. This species here, the black sea hare, was seen here back in the early 2000s, and not much anymore. I don't know, they came and disappeared. But yeah, there are many reasons why those things can happen. I didn't really answer your question, but I'm telling you my point of view on that. Well, those are the egg strands of the black sea hare. They lay their eggs in things that, structures that look like pasta, like spaghetti. And those tubes, they are like hollow tubes. And they're little groupings of eggs, or embryos actually, fertilized eggs, that are occupying the length of those tubes. Very interesting egg masses. That's the one that was showing in the very beginning. It's a little sea slug from the Sanibel causeway, and it measures probably about a ½ an inch in size. It's very small, but very elegant, and it totally lacks a shell. It doesn't have a shell. The protection that they acquire their protection by having lots of chemicals that are, kind of nasty tasting and toxic, that plays the role of a shell. It's a chemical shell, if you will. So the predators don't like to bite on that. Yes?
What are the blue fingertips?
I'm sorry?
The blue tips?
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, those blue tips, they are the end of those projections that the animal has. And a lot of those strong collars of sea slugs, I was mentioning that they have nasty substances, they have toxic substances. And a lot of those animals that do not taste good and that can kill a predator if they bite on that. A lot of them have strong collars to remind the predators of a bad experience. I don't know if it has a very technical name, and it does happen with caterpillars, those very colorful tropical caterpillars of tropical butterflies that have very impressive collars. They do exactly the same thing. They have very, what's the word for something that doesn't taste good, or you know what I'm saying, toxic substances. And,
Nasty.
I'm sorry?
Nasty.
Yeah, that's the word. And go cut to the chase, right? Yeah. So yes, I mean, if a predator bites on that and survives, and that animal, he or she, will keep that into their little memories, and they may do it again, and it reinforces that memory, and doesn't do it. Next time he sees that sea slug, he says, no, not that one. I'll find something else. That's more or less how it works according to the ecologists. It's called aposematic coloration. It's a coloration that reminds the predator, don't go there. So yeah, that's a pen shell. Pen shells are really fantastic critters. They bury in the sand, not totally. There is a part of it. You know what a pen shell. I don't know if I have a picture on top of it. I don't. But pen shells, they look like long triangles, right? And the pointed part is under the sand. It's buried in the sand. And about a third of the length juts out to the sand. And in the animal, those bivalves are filter feeders. They filter the water like oysters. They suck the water in, retain their food, which is mostly microalgae, and then return the water. They clean the water, so to speak. And this is how they are. I mean, I was telling you about the outing that I did with Captain Brian Holloway from, he has a small boat and does outings on the bay. And we went to Cayo Costa, we went to Usepa and Pine Island. And we ended up in a place in off North Captiva in the bayside. It was loaded with very healthy looking stiff pen shells. And that's how they are in nature. They jut out of the sand. This is a zigzag scallop, also local species. Notice that I have moved from snails to bivalves. Mollusks, they have a shell with two parts. And you can see the fringe here. This is how it looks like. That's a very special shell because the top is kind of flat, and the bottom is like a bowl, like a hemisphere, like a half ball. And here is the living part of the animal. And you may not be able to see from where, maybe you guys on this table can see, but there are little eyes here, like little silver balls. And they have very sophisticated eyes that can see shapes, can see movement, and some think they may be able to see color. And I'll show you next a cross section. A colleague of mine from the University of South Carolina published a paper on the eyes of scallops. And this is actually the sea scallop. The scallop that's the most commonly purveyed for food. I mean, if you go to a restaurant and ask for scallops, that's the species you're probably getting. It's called the either ocean scallop or sea scallop. And this cross section shows how complex their eyes can be, and there are like anywhere between 50 and 200 of those eyes, depending on the species. The eyes have lens, like we do. They have two kinds of retina, and they are very different from our eyes because there is a mirror on the back that picks up the light, the image, and focus the image. It's pretty impressive. And then there is the eye stalk here. So that's all in a little scallop. And scallops are really cool too because that's the same species of the eye I just showed you, the sea scallop. And because they can swim, so if there is a threat, if a big fish wants to get them, they can swim. They kind of clap their valves, the halves of the shell, and produce little jets of water to move in different directions. Well, this is another local species, the opposite of the scallop. The scallop is this all about action and moving and being able to see and all that. This is a much more humble species, but I really love it, and now you see why. It's called a striate piddock, and they are related to angel wings. I don't know if you know what an angel wing. Angel wings are beautiful, bigger. Those they reach about an inch in size. But what's really cool about this species is that they live on driftwood. So if a piece of wood detaches from a tree and goes floating on this, the Gulf of Mexico or open water in the open ocean, the little larvae of that mollusk will find it and settle there, and they will begin their lives, which is the lifestyle is boring into the wood. So this is a little piece of wood we found on Bowman's Beach. That's about 4 inches in size, in length. And I counted more than 300 of those shells. I estimated more than 300 on a little piece of wood. And what they do is they they use their shell. This part here, the front part of the shell is like a cheese grater. The shell is really rough, and they make a movement like back and forth, or kind of turning, and they end up, they bar, pretty much like a tool. They will bar into the wood, and they spend their whole lives encased into the piece of wood. That's what I used to call them stowaways for life. Because once they get into that ship, there's no way out. And they are, I have another picture of the same little log, but in cross section, showing the shells here. They look like little angel wings, actually. And they are always close to the surface. Their rear ends is where they suck the water in for feeding. They have to be close to the surface so they can take the water in for filter feeding, because they filter the water for food. This is also, I want to just show you a couple of things we're doing. This is a part of a new exhibit that will come. I mentioned the exhibit on Southwest Florida shells and the new Great Hall of Shells that will be opening hopefully sometime this quarter, no later than March, I hope. It's complicated. We did more than about 40 exhibits since Hurricane Ian hit. We went back to the drawing board and did the research and did all the acquired objects, images, videos, and we have a couple of companies working, actually more than a couple. We have several designers and fabricators of cases and all working. It's pretty much like rebuilding a big house. So it didn't happen as fast as we hoped for, but it will happen early this year. In one of the exhibits, the Southwest Florida exhibits, we have a map showing some of the favorite shelling locations in Southwest Florida, between Boca Grande and Cape Romano in the 10,000 Islands. So we try to, we try to blend the attraction of shells with some teachings in biology, natural history, and also the cultural aspects that shells are so well known for. Throughout the human history, as symbols of religion, inspiration for architecture, art, and all those cool things. Also, I mentioned the websites earlier today and the show guide. I've been publishing a blog called the Curator's Corner, and every 2 weeks we have like 2 or 3 little articles. We have the Shell of the Week also, which is usually only about local shells, or if not local, Florida shells. And it's shellmuseum.org/blog. One of the successful things we're doing, I get a lot of feedback from happy users and happy customers, is those family pages in which I lay down all the local species of a group, like in this case here, the mussels, Southwest Florida mussels, and then I just did one on the winnow traps, and people love that because they can see the differences from among the different local species. Those are the different families. The drillers, the mussels, the cockles, arcs, moon snails, dove snails, and all. Also, more about mollusks. We worked on together with a couple of colleagues from other Florida institutions on this episode of Changing Seas, which is a very, very cool ocean-related, ocean science, ocean culture series published by the South Florida PBS out of Miami, Fort Lauderdale. And this was the episode 1 of season 15. So it's called Changing Seas TV, season 15. It's all about, I have several interviews doing this video done at the museum, on the beach here, the lighthouse. So it's, if you want to learn more about shells. And if you don't have to write. If you want to know that, just email me or send a message to the museum to info@shellmuseum.org. Always good to remind everyone that live shelling on Sanibel is not allowed, and there are a few reasons for that. Actually, the whole Leal County is under that curfew. Sanibel since 1994, and Leal County, January 1995, and Leal County since 2002. And it's our beloved museum after Hurricane Charlie. And I want to thank you. And I don't know if you have any questions. Yes.
My family went out to Lighthouse Beach a couple weeks ago, and it's much bigger, and there were no shells. The sand restoration covered everything up, I guess. Are
Yeah.
they gonna all come back, or?
Yeah, well, did you all hear, she mentioned about the fact that there are no shells after what they call beach nourishment or restoration, and that's usually the case. Yeah, it's a fine balance between the human needs and and the environment and all. And also they're sucking all this sand. I don't know I think now they brought the sand from Central Florida, from lakes in Central Florida, which is also not a good idea because it's not marine sand. In the past, they used to go offshore when they did Captiva and Blind Pass. They used to go offshore 3 miles and suck, the sand and deliver the sand onto the beach. And that also would kill a lot of things from offshore. But what happens is, given enough time, things will bounce back. That's not as bad as what we're seeing with the water releases. It's not my specialty, but I'm a biological oceanographer. I know what it's not a good thing. Anyway, I don't want to end on a bad note. Yes.
I just want to put a plug in for the gift shop at the Shell Museum. I was there with my 3 grandchildren a week ago, 6, 10, and 12. And every single one of them found something they wanted, and they were educational, and they were jewelry. But, it's a great place to shop for grandchildren, or for adults too. I just want to.
Yeah, I want to thank you. All heard she's been mentioning about the Shell Museum gift store. We call it the museum store. And yes, true, we have, I do a lot of work with the store manager, picking up books especially, and things that I find of educational interest. And just to end on a friendly note, I just want to say that Pat Jones, who is sitting right here, she was the first Shell Museum store manager when I was first hired. And Pat, every time I see Pat, she reminds me that the day I walked in for an interview, I was wearing a pink shirt. And that's true. Thank you, Pat. Thanks everyone for your